What would you do if your partner, the person you trusted the most, spent all of your hard-earned money without a second thought? This is exactly what happened to Mark. He worked tirelessly for years, putting in long hours and sacrifices to provide a comfortable life for his family. But his wife, Lisa, had other plans. What began as small, seemingly harmless purchases quickly spiraled into something much worse. In the blink of an eye, Mark found himself not just financially drained, but emotionally betrayed by the one person he thought would always have his back. Lisa's spending habits were initially overlooked. Mark had always been the provider, and while Lisa did contribute to their household, her spending often seemed a little too extravagant. It was easy to dismiss at first, a shopping spree here, a new gadget there. But over time, it became clear that Lisa's spending habits were out of control. She didn't just buy things she wanted, she started dipping into their savings and, eventually, taking out loans under Mark's name. When Mark discovered what had happened, it hit him like a ton of bricks. His savings, his retirement fund, even their children's college fund, gone. The future they had planned for, the life they had worked so hard to build, was now in jeopardy. Imagine being in Mark's shoes. You've worked tirelessly to secure a future for your family, only to find that it's all been jeopardized by the person you love the most. And yet, it's not just the money that hurts, it's the feeling of betrayal. But this is not just a story of loss. What Mark did next was something no one could have predicted. The decisions he made and the path he chose to take would have far-reaching consequences, not only for his marriage but for their entire lives. The story of Mark and Lisa is not just about financial ruin, it's a cautionary tale about trust, betrayal, and the lengths someone will go to in order to protect what they hold dear. This story is about much more than financial mismanagement, it's about trust, the fragility of relationships, and the unexpected decisions that change everything. Mark's reaction to Lisa's actions, and the aftermath that followed, will leave you questioning what you would do in his place. It's a story that's as shocking as it is heartbreaking, and by the end, you'll be left wondering if true forgiveness is ever possible after such a betrayal. Mark and Lisa had been married for over 10 years. They met in college, where Mark was studying business and Lisa was pursuing a degree in art history. Their connection was immediate. Mark was drawn to Lisa's creativity and passion, while Lisa admired Mark's practicality and ambition. They balanced each other well, and as their relationship progressed, it seemed like a perfect match. Mark came from a middle-class family where money was always tight. His parents had instilled in him a strong work ethic and the importance of saving for the future. Lisa, on the other hand, grew up in a family where appearances mattered more than financial security. Her parents were wealthy, but they were also careless with money, living a lavish lifestyle without thinking about the long-term consequences. Lisa had always been accustomed to a life of luxury, and while she wasn't exactly reckless with her finances in the beginning, her upbringing had shaped her understanding of money in ways that would soon become problematic. They got married shortly after graduation, and soon after, Mark landed a solid job at a financial services firm. He worked hard, climbed the corporate ladder, and provided a comfortable life for them both. Lisa initially worked part-time as a gallery assistant while pursuing her passion for art, but after a few years, she decided to focus on their home life. With Mark's steady income, they were able to live in a nice suburban neighborhood, drive decent cars, and take vacations to exotic locations. In the beginning, Lisa did contribute to the household in her own way. She managed the home, took care of their 2 children, and occasionally sold her artwork at local galleries. Mark never questioned her spending, assuming that she was being responsible with their finances. However, as time went on, things began to change. Lisa's love for the finer things in life started to influence her decisions. While Mark focused on saving and investing, Lisa became more focused on appearances and the idea of living a life of luxury. Before everything fell apart, Mark and Lisa appeared to have it all. They had a comfortable house, a beautiful family, and the promise of a secure future. They had a decent savings account, and Mark had been investing wisely for their retirement. They weren't millionaires, but they were financially stable. Mark had always been the cautious one, budgeting every month and setting aside money for unexpected expenses. Lisa, on the other hand, was more spontaneous, often choosing to live in the moment and buy what she wanted when she wanted it. Despite their differences, Mark trusted Lisa. He believed in her ability to manage the household, and he thought she understood the importance of maintaining financial stability. He didn't see the signs early enough. Small, unimportant purchases began to add up, but it wasn't until Lisa took out a significant loan under Mark's name without his knowledge that the situation truly escalated. She justified it to herself as a temporary expense, a way to improve their quality of life. But over time, it became clear that the temporary was anything but. At the time, Mark had just started a new project at work, one that required his full attention. He trusted Lisa to manage the finances in his absence. But what he didn't know was that she had started racking up credit card debt, using their savings to fund expensive vacations, then indulging in her desire for high-end fashion and accessories. Lisa was getting deeper into debt, and Mark was oblivious to it all, until the numbers started adding up in ways that couldn't be ignored. As time went on, Lisa's spending habits began to escalate. What started as occasional indulgences soon turned into a pattern of excessive and unchecked expenditures. She developed a taste for high-end fashion, luxury vacations, and the latest gadgets. Designer dresses, expensive jewelry, and exclusive sport treatments became regular occurrences rather than rare treats. Lisa justified these purchases as rewards for her hard work managing the household and raising their children, believing she deserved to enjoy the finer things in life. At first, Mark didn't think much of it. He wanted Lisa to be happy and felt that she deserved to pamper herself occasionally. However, he began to notice that packages were arriving at their home almost daily. Credit card statements revealed charges from upscale boutiques and online retailers he didn't recognize. When he gently questioned Lisa about the expenses, she brushed off his concerns, assuring him that everything was under control and that she was taking advantage of great deals that would save them money in the long run. Unbeknownst to Mark, Lisa had been funding her lifestyle not just with their joint account but also by opening new credit lines in both of their names. She had maxed out several credit cards and taken out personal loans, all while keeping Mark in the dark. The family's savings were dwindling rapidly. Funds that were meant for their children's college education and their retirement were being siphoned off to cover Lisa's mounting debts. The financial strain began to manifest in subtle ways. Utility bills went unpaid and notices started arriving in the mail. Mark was perplexed when his credit card was declined while paying for a business lunch. He initially attributed these incidents to simple banking errors or minor oversights, never suspecting the true extent of the problem. One evening, Mark came home to find a brand new luxury car parked in their driveway. Confused, he walked inside to find Lisa excitedly showing off the vehicle to a friend. When he confronted her, she exclaimed, "Surprise! I traded in our old car. Isn't it fabulous?" Mark was stunned. The car they had was only a few years old and in perfect working condition. This new purchase was extravagant and unnecessary. "How did we afford this?" Mark asked, trying to keep his composure. "Don't worry about it," Lisa replied nonchalantly. "I handled everything. Besides, we deserve something nice after all these years." Mark felt a knot forming in his stomach. This was more than just an impulsive purchase, it was a significant financial decision made without his input. His attempts to discuss their finances were met with deflection and irritation from Lisa. She accused him of being controlling and not trusting her judgment. As the months went by, the arguments became more frequent. Mark discovered that Lisa had been hiding bills and redirecting mail to prevent him from seeing late notices and collection letters. He found a stash of unopened envelopes stuffed in the back of her closet. When confronted, Lisa broke down in tears, apologizing profusely and promising to change. She blamed stress, loneliness, and a desire to keep up appearances for her actions. It became clear that Lisa's spending was symptomatic of deeper emotional issues. She confessed to feeling unfulfilled and disconnected. Shopping had become a way for her to cope with these feelings, a temporary escape that provided momentary happiness. Mark suggested they seek counseling, both for their marriage and to address her spending habits. Lisa agreed, but her commitment was short-lived. She attended a few sessions before insisting that she didn't need help and that Mark was overreacting. Trust between them was eroding quickly. Mark felt helpless as he watched their financial stability crumble. He began to take on extra work to cover the mounting debts, often staying late at the office or taking freelance jobs on the weekends. This only widened the gap between them. Lisa resented his absence, while Mark grew resentful of her unwillingness to acknowledge the severity of the situation. Their children began to notice the tension at home. Family dinners were filled with silence or thinly veiled hostility. The once warm and loving atmosphere had turned cold. Friends and extended family started to inquire about their well-being, sensing that something was amiss, but both Mark and Lisa were too ashamed to reveal the truth. The final straw came when Mark received a call from their bank notifying him of an overdraft on their account. Confused and embarrassed, he scheduled a meeting with their financial advisor. It was during this meeting that the full extent of their financial crisis was unveiled. The advisor presented a comprehensive report detailing the debts, loans, and liabilities accumulated in both their names. Mark felt as if the ground had fallen away beneath him. The numbers were staggering, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. He realized that without immediate and drastic action, they could lose everything: their home, their savings, and their children's future. Mark had always trusted Lisa. They had built their lives together, and he believed in the partnership they shared. But when he checked their bank account one evening and saw a significant withdrawal, something inside him snapped. It wasn't just the money, it was the realization that Lisa had been hiding something from him for months. The red flags were no longer ignorable. He sat down, examined their financial records, and realized that their savings had been drained. He noticed large transfers to unknown accounts and multiple credit card payments that neither he nor Lisa could explain. It felt like the ground was slipping out from under him. Initially, Mark tried to confront Lisa gently. He asked her about the charges, the loans, and the missing savings. Lisa, caught off guard, denied everything. She claimed that there was nothing wrong, that she was simply managing their finances and making sure the family was well taken care of. But Mark's suspicions grew as he dug deeper. One evening, Mark took the bold step of going through their shared credit card statements and found receipts for purchases he knew they couldn't afford: designer clothes, luxury vacations, and even some expensive private shopping experiences. The final blow came when Mark discovered that Lisa had taken out a loan in his name without his knowledge or consent. The loan was substantial, and it had been used to fund a series of her lavish shopping sprees. Mark was stunned. How could Lisa do this to him? He had trusted her with everything, and yet she had betrayed him in the most devastating way possible. As the truth sank in, Mark began to question everything. How long had this been going on? Had she been spending recklessly for months or even years? What would their future look like now? Mark's mind raced as he thought about their children's college fund, their retirement savings, and everything they had planned for the years ahead. Lisa's financial irresponsibility had put it all at risk. The next day, Mark confronted Lisa directly. This wasn't a gentle conversation anymore. He couldn't pretend that everything was okay. He asked her point blank about the loans, the credit card bills, and the money that had disappeared. Lisa's reaction was a mix of denial and guilt. She initially tried to justify her actions, claiming that she didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. She told him that she had been under pressure to keep up with social expectations and that it felt impossible to keep up with the lifestyle she had grown used to. But Mark wasn't buying it. He wanted to know how she could have lied to him for so long. How could she spend their savings without even considering the consequences? It wasn't just about the money, it was the betrayal of trust. Lisa, finally realizing the gravity of the situation, broke down and admitted to everything. She had been hiding the truth from Mark for months, unable to control her spending, and had put their entire financial future in jeopardy. But by then, the damage was done. Mark felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and confusion. He had never imagined that his wife, someone he had built a life with, would betray him like this. Their children were young, and the financial future he had always planned for them was now uncertain. Lisa's actions had torn apart their sense of security, and Mark was left feeling vulnerable, exposed, and unsure of what to do next. Lisa, for her part, was devastated by the consequences of her actions. She realized that she had not only jeopardized their financial stability but also hurt the person she loved most. She had pushed Mark to a breaking point, and now their relationship was hanging by a thread. As the emotional fallout continued, Mark realized that this was no longer just a financial crisis, it was a relationship crisis. The question now wasn't just about fixing their finances, but whether or not they could rebuild the trust that had been shattered. The emotional impact of Mark's discovery was overwhelming. He felt both furious and heartbroken, betrayed by the woman he thought he knew so well. But Mark was a man of action, not someone who would sit idly by while his life unraveled. He knew that he couldn't ignore the financial devastation Lisa had caused, and he had to make a choice. After several sleepless nights, Mark finally confronted Lisa. He didn't yell or scream, instead he calmly laid out the evidence he had gathered. The credit card bills, the loan documents, and the disappearing savings. His voice was steady but cold as he asked, "How could you do this to me? To us?" Lisa's reaction was a mixture of defensiveness and guilt. She cried and apologized, claiming that she had never intended to hurt him. She admitted that she had spent more than she should have, but she argued that she had been feeling neglected and overwhelmed. She told Mark that she had tried to keep their lives as normal as possible, but deep down, she had always felt unimportant, as though her needs were always secondary to his career. Despite her emotional outburst, Mark was resolute. He had to protect his family and his future, and he couldn't allow Lisa's actions to continue unchecked. He made it clear that their marriage couldn't survive if she continued down this destructive path. This wasn't just about money, it was about trust, respect, and the values they had built their life on. Mark's next step was a tough one. He decided to take control of their finances. He froze their joint accounts and made sure that any remaining savings were protected. Lisa was furious at first, calling it an overreaction, but Mark refused to budge. He consulted with a financial advisor who helped him understand the full extent of their financial situation. It was worse than he had imagined. Lisa's debts had reached a staggering amount, and the damage she had done was irreversible. Despite Lisa's pleas and apologies, Mark knew that something had to change. He couldn't keep enabling her behavior, and he had to take responsibility for his own future. So, after discussing it with a lawyer, Mark decided to take legal action to protect himself from the financial chaos Lisa had created. They filed for a temporary separation, allowing Mark some space to reevaluate their relationship and whether it was worth salvaging. Lisa, devastated by the separation, begged Mark to reconsider. She promised to change, to go to therapy, and to pay back every penny. But Mark's trust had been shattered, and no amount of promises could fix that. He knew that her spending habits were rooted in deeper emotional issues and that it wasn't something that could be solved overnight. For the first time in years, Mark felt a sense of relief. He had regained control over his life and the weight of his financial burdens was beginning to lift. In the months that followed, Mark focused on rebuilding his own life. He worked with his financial advisor to create a recovery plan, which included cutting down on unnecessary expenses and rebuilding his savings. Lisa, meanwhile, was left to face the consequences of her actions. While she did start seeing a therapist and began working on her financial recovery, it was clear that their relationship had changed forever. The confrontation was a turning point. Mark knew their marriage would never be the same again. The trust that had once held their relationship together was shattered, and no amount of apologies or tears could undo the damage. Lisa tried to salvage the situation by promising to make amends and promising to never repeat her actions, but Mark's decision was already made. He couldn't ignore the fact that she had betrayed him at such a fundamental level. Despite her remorse, the couple's financial situation was dire. Mark had to act quickly to secure his financial future both for himself and for their children. He knew that in order to fix what Lisa had broken, drastic measures would have to be taken. The first step was to take control of their financial accounts. Mark immediately closed joint accounts, froze their credit, and contacted a financial advisor to figure out the best way to recover from the damage. While Mark was focused on sorting out the financial mess, he knew he couldn't just let the issue slide. The loan that Lisa had taken out in his name was illegal. She had forged his signature without his consent. In many ways, it wasn't just a betrayal of their relationship, but also a violation of the law. After consulting with a lawyer, Mark was advised to take legal action. He filed for fraud against Lisa and began the process of formally separating their financial affairs. Lisa, shocked by the severity of Mark's response, tried to convince him that the loan was an accident and that she had only done it because she felt it was necessary to maintain their lifestyle. However, the legal proceedings moved forward. Mark knew that he had to make sure this didn't happen again and that their children wouldn't have to bear the financial burden of Lisa's decisions. As Mark navigated the legal and financial aftermath, the emotional toll on both of them was immense. Lisa struggled with feelings of guilt and regret, but Mark was more focused on his children and how to move forward with them. Their relationship had been irreparably damaged, and both parties knew that a reconciliation was no longer possible. For Mark, the priority was ensuring that his children grew up in a stable environment, free from the toxic influence of the situation. The emotional scars, however, lingered. Mark found himself questioning everything he had once believed in: the sanctity of marriage, the importance of trust, and his ability to see through the veil of appearances. He had been so certain about Lisa, and yet, in the end, she had betrayed him in a way that left him questioning his own judgment. Mark's decision to confront Lisa and take legal action sent ripples through their social circle and family. At first, both sides of the family were in disbelief. Mark's parents, who had always seen Lisa as a loving and devoted wife, couldn't understand how she could have betrayed their son. They were heartbroken for Mark, knowing how hard he had worked to build a stable future for his family. Meanwhile, Lisa's family responded with a mix of denial and defense. They tried to downplay her actions, claiming that she had made a mistake and that Mark was overreacting by involving lawyers. Family gatherings became tense, with each side trying to avoid discussing the elephant in the room. Mark's siblings stood firmly by his side, offering support and helping him navigate the legal and emotional turmoil. Lisa, on the other hand, faced criticism from her own relatives, who began to distance themselves as her actions came to light. Word of the situation eventually spread to their friends, and the reactions were just as polarized. Some of their mutual friends sympathized with Mark, understanding the depth of his betrayal. Others, however, questioned whether the legal action was too harsh. Lisa tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy in her social life, but the whispers and judgment were impossible to escape. Mark, who had always valued his privacy, found the public nature of the fallout to be one of the hardest aspects to deal with. He avoided social events and focused on his children and work, trying to shield his family from further scrutiny. His closest friends remained supportive, but even they struggled to reconcile the Lisa they thought they knew with the person who had caused so much harm. In the months following the confrontation and the legal proceedings, Mark found himself in a whirlwind of emotions. The initial shock of discovering Lisa's betrayal had given way to anger, sadness, and ultimately, a sense of relief. As hard as it was to face the reality of their situation, Mark knew that confronting the problem head-on was the first step in his journey toward healing. Mark focused on rebuilding his life, starting with his financial independence. He worked closely with a financial advisor to ensure his personal accounts were secure and his investments protected. It was a slow process, but over time he regained control of his finances, knowing that his future and his children's future were no longer at the mercy of Lisa's reckless decisions. But financial recovery wasn't enough. Mark realized that the emotional toll of the betrayal was something he couldn't simply fix with money. He sought therapy to help him process his feelings of betrayal, loss, and heartbreak. It was in therapy that Mark began to understand how deeply his sense of self-worth had been tied to his relationship with Lisa. The journey wasn't easy. He struggled with guilt, wondering if there was something he could have done to prevent what had happened. But slowly, he came to terms with the fact that Lisa's actions were not his fault. He wasn't responsible for her poor choices, and he had done everything in his power to provide for their family. On the other side, Lisa's road to redemption was much more complicated. After the legal proceedings and the financial fallout, Lisa was forced to face the consequences of her actions. She had lost Mark's trust, and their marriage was on the brink of collapse. But instead of retreating into denial, Lisa realized that she had to take full responsibility for her actions if she ever hoped to regain any sense of respect or integrity. Lisa began her own journey of self-reflection, attending therapy and working on her personal issues. She acknowledged that her reckless spending was not just about materialism, it was a symptom of deeper emotional struggles. Over time, Lisa made sincere efforts to understand why she had made the decisions she did and how she could start over. Though their marriage was beyond repair, Lisa's efforts to change didn't go unnoticed. Mark saw that she was truly trying to better herself, but he knew that rebuilding their relationship would take more than just a change of heart. It would require years of rebuilding trust, something that Mark was no longer willing to invest in. As for Mark, he chose to focus on his future. He continued to be a devoted father to their 2 children, ensuring they felt loved and secure despite the emotional chaos at home. He threw himself into his work and personal growth, finding new passions and rediscovering his love for life. He had learned the hard way that life could change in an instant, but that didn't mean it had to be the end. It was, in fact, a new beginning. Despite Lisa's efforts to make amends, Mark realized that trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult to rebuild. He spent many sleepless nights thinking about the future, about their children, and about what was best for everyone. After countless discussions with therapists, friends, and family, Mark came to a painful decision. His marriage to Lisa, once filled with love and promise, had reached its breaking point. He filed for divorce. For Mark, it wasn't just a decision based on financial betrayal, it was the culmination of years of emotional strain and unmet needs. He had tried to communicate with Lisa about their finances, but her secrecy and reckless behavior had pushed him beyond the point of no return. Lisa's actions had put their family's stability at risk, and Mark knew that for the sake of his well-being and that of his children, he needed to walk away. In the years following their divorce, Mark focused on rebuilding his life from the ground up. His children, now older, had adjusted to the new family dynamic. Mark made sure to provide them with stability and a sense of security, both emotionally and financially. He continued to work hard, but he also made time for himself, taking up new hobbies, traveling, and, most importantly, healing. Lisa, meanwhile, had to face the consequences of her actions in a different way. She sought therapy and, for the first time, began to understand the deeper issues that had driven her behavior. It wasn't just about spending money, it was about insecurity, fear, and feeling unimportant. Lisa worked hard to rebuild her own life, but she knew that her actions had left a permanent mark on her relationship with Mark. She accepted that she would never fully regain his trust, but she worked toward becoming a better version of herself. Looking back, Mark often reflects on the lessons he learned from this painful chapter of his life. He learned the hard way that trust and communication are the bedrock of any relationship, and that no amount of material wealth can substitute for emotional honesty and mutual respect. Mark's story isn't just about financial betrayal, it's about reclaiming one's sense of self-worth, standing up for what is right, and learning to heal from the wounds that others leave behind. In the end, both Mark and Lisa moved on with their lives, each taking their own lessons from the past. While their paths had diverged, they had both grown in ways they never could have imagined, and both were determined to ensure that the mistakes of the past would not define their futures.